And the fear is that God will bring whatever it is that we did, that we said we wouldn't do, He will bring it to light, all that we tried to hide. But Jesus knows about the mistakes that we think disqualifies us from serving Him. It doesn't matter what it is. He already knows about it.
He does.
But surely our mistakes would disqualify us from getting an invitation to be a follower of Christ? I mean, He wouldn't want us. Well, if that's how we feel this morning, if there's anybody here that feels that way, let me remind you of a story of one of Christ's closest followers, Matthew. Now, I'm not going to read much of it, but I'm just going to go back when Christ called Matthew. Again, we're in Luke chapter 5:27. It said, after these things, He went forth and saw a tax collector. Some King James versions will say publican, not Republican, but publican. We're not political this morning. We don't want to go there. Tax collector, he said, he went forth and saw a tax collector whose name was Levi, sitting at the table or the tax office, and said to him, follow me. Now, Matthew, as we just read here, being called Levi, you got to understand that the name Levi meant something. For him to have been given that name meant that his parents expected him to serve the Lord like the Levites of the Old Testament. And if he was considered to be a Levite, from birth he was set aside to be a spiritual leader for the nation of Israel. His grandfather and his father probably had all become priests serving the Lord. By age 12, he would have been required to learn the law, the first 5 books of the Bible. The Old Testament at that time was the Bible. He would have been required to memorize that. It's likely that Matthew would have become a disciple of one of the rabbis in that day. But for whatever reason, Matthew didn't make the grade. He didn't make the cut. Anybody not make the basketball team or the baseball team or the football team weren't good enough, you got cut? The NFL, every season they start off with this big roster and then they go so many weeks and then they cut the roster down. You're weeded out, you didn't make it. They go another couple of weeks and they cut it down some more. You didn't make it either. Matthew didn't make the cut to be a rabbi, to be a preacher. He flunked out of rabbi school. Whatever happened, we know that something definitely went wrong, because instead of serving the Lord, he is really serving himself now. He turned his back on his own people, and he became a tax collector for the Romans. So essentially, his job description was to unfairly take money from his people and give it to the occupying Roman government. And even if he had collected taxes fairly, he was working for the enemy. But in those days, there was no such thing as an honest tax collector. And we don't like the tax man today. But these were a little different than they are today. You see, they made their living on how much more they got from you. If you owed the Roman government X number of denarii, he was going to tack on another 10, 15, 20, 25, whatever thought he could get away with, and that was his. So he was robbing, he was stealing from his own people to line his pockets, as well as give to the occupiers of Rome. So a tax collector was seen as a religious as well as a social outcast. In other words, according to Jewish law, he was ceremonial and unclean. It wasn't that he couldn't go in the temple. He was not even allowed in the outer court in the temple. How much he was despised as a tax collector. Well, we have a lot in common with Matthew. Now, maybe we're not stealing money from our neighbors. Hopefully we're not. But like Matthew, we've all become disappointments. At some point in our life, we have become disappointments. We haven't measured up. We didn't make the cut. we're told in the book of Romans that we have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Amen. So therefore, we didn't make the cut. We didn't measure up. We failed. We disappointed. If we didn't disappoint anyone else, we disappointed God. Amen. But most likely, we disappointed ourselves. We disappointed our family. We even disappointed some of our friends. So we're like Matthew. We've said things that we shouldn't have said. We've done things we wish we hadn't have done. And as hard as we've tried to rub the stain away from our lives, it just won't come out. You know, sometimes we can get a stain on a carpet or a piece of furniture or on a poster in our car. It doesn't matter what you do, it just will not come out. That stain is there. And I can't help but wonder if sometimes in our attempt to ignore the stains in our life, and in this case, Matthew's life, that because he tried to ignore that stain, he gave up on trying to get it out, he became this tax collector. You see, that's what happens with poor choices. We make a poor choice in life, and then the next time it becomes easier to make another poor choice, and then another poor choice, and after a while it just snowballs. That's unintended by the Daily Brother. So it gets to the point after it snowballs, we say, what's the use? Why even try anymore? Ever been there? Ever felt like just giving up and saying, what's the use? It's just not worth it. And I think that whatever Matthew's past was, he had reached a point where he wasn't willing to even hide his past stains and his past mistakes anymore. Now, I'm just imagining, this is just preacher's opinion now, so don't take it as gospel. I'm just imagining that as Matthew grew up, I don't think that he ever imagined it would turn out this way. He didn't think he was going to be a failure. I mean, he thought he would succeed in life. But now in his life, if he's honest with himself, he's full of regret and he's full of guilt. If I could only start over, things would be different. If I could just start over, things would be different. But what could he do now? There's too much road behind him. There's too many stains that he's left as he walks along. There's too many mistakes in his past. It's just too late for me to start over. How many in the world say that same thing today? No need. Too many stains and they're not going to come out. Going back, when our children ask us if we still love them, they do that because they cannot imagine that we would still love them after disappointing us. My guess is that Matthew no longer asked that question of God. I think he had gotten past the place where he couldn't imagine that God still wanted him. I'm sure that by this time in Matthew's life, he had heard about this different rabbi that was in the community. This one whose name was Jesus, and yet he was doing things differently than the rest of the rabbi were. So you have this one day when Matthew's at his tax collector's booth and Jesus stops by and speaks to him. Now, I don't believe there was probably anyone there that day that would have predicted what Jesus would have told him or said to him. No way in the world would they would have predicted he would have said, follow me. But in those two words, it changed everything for Matthew. Follow me. A Jewish rabbi asking a tax collector for the Roman oppressors to be one of his followers.